Hello again, everyone. Today, I want to talk about driving. I once read somewhere that you can tell a lot about a society by the way the people drive. Sorry to say, but if that is true, we Trinis are in big trouble. When I was younger, I used to love to drive. I would leave Couva, where I lived at the time, drive to Aruca to pick up this guy I was seeing. Then we would drive to Diego Martin to hang out with friends and do the whole thing in reverse at the end of the night. If you aren't from this country, trust me when I say that is a lot of driving. At one time, I was the only one with a car in my group of friends, so I drove everywhere. Let me tell you, that got old pretty fast. When you go to a party and you're driving home, and although they promised to keep you company, everybody's asleep in the car but you, that is not fun. Once I just kept driving around and around this one roundabout until everybody woke up. I mean, come on, joke is joke. I don't enjoy driving anymore. Between the traffic and the bad roads, and of course the crazy driving, it is just too stressful. Now, I'm no speed demon, but I like to move along at a decent clip, and inching along in traffic is not my idea of a good time. I remember my dad was a slow driver. The really annoying thing was that whenever we had to go anywhere, he would be the first person to get ready, and he would really hustle the rest of us out of the house as he hated to be late. Then we'd get in the car, and he'd be crawling along. If he ever sped up at all, my mother would say, Mario Andretti, and we would all laugh. If you don't know who Mario Andretti is, Google it. This is not Discovery Channel. We also had a neighbor, Mr. McCarthy, who drove a big old car and who would drive at an okay pace until he got into conversation. Then the more he talked, the slower he'd go. People in other cars would stare at us as they drove by. So embarrassing. Luckily, the car was big enough that you could slouch down in the back seat so nobody saw you. Still, I preferred to walk miles than to get a lift from Mr. McCarthy. To this day, I can't stand driving behind someone who, for no reason at all, is just driving slowly. I don't know how my son's first words weren't, "Drive your car now, what is wrong with you?" I also don't like it when people take a long time to pull off when the traffic light turns green. Like you know it's going to go back to red at some point, right? Mind you, there are some drivers who take that to the extreme and start blowing their horns if you haven't moved off in that fraction of a nanosecond it takes to lift your foot off the brake and move it to the accelerator when the light turns green. I mean, what is that about? I'm always tempted to cancel all of that day's appointments and just spend the day sitting at that light instead, blowing your horn at me for no reason. And let's talk about this horn blowing habit in general. I think that is another one of those areas where I might not be a Trini. I hardly ever blew my horn. A car would have to be bearing down on me and in real danger of smashing into my car for me to blow my horn. And other than that, I only toot my horn to say thanks when someone lets me out of a side street. Yes, people do that on occasion. It's not common, but they do it. But the average Trini has their hand on their horn at all times. You're driving too slow, horn. They see a friend, horn. The lights change, horn. Taking too long to cross the road, horn. The obstacle is on my side, but I'm coming through anyway, horn. I feel a 2023 soca tune coming on. But to continue, that last example would usually call for horn and flashing lights. The light flashing is confusing too, because sometimes it means go ahead and turn, and other times it means I'm not stopping, so you better not think about turning. You just have to pick which one you think it means, say a quick Hail Mary, and go for it. Trinis also manage to stop for you to turn or to come out of a parking spot and quarrel with you at the same time. Well, go if you're going now. What you waiting on? Horn. A maxi driver once blared his horn at me and shouted "road hog" because I wouldn't let him cut in front of me after he drove past the line of traffic on the shoulder. I suggested to him that he Google the term because he really didn't seem to know what it meant. That just triggered a stream of obscenities about me, my relatives, and their body parts that would have made my high school biology teacher proud. Maxi and taxi drivers would take up a whole episode of just saying for themselves, to be sure. But right now, I want to say one thing in defense of taxi drivers. When that passenger says drive, I could take it here. He means right in that spot. And most of the time, the driver has had no idea of where this person wants to get out before he says those words. So don't blame the driver alone for that sudden stop. And trust me, that other guy in the back who's getting out just a few kilometers up the road, well, he isn't going to get out when the other guy does, nor is he going to say anything until the driver pulls off again. I mean, why spoil the surprise? To be honest though, you hear of very few car crashes involving taxi drivers despite all this. And depending on the route, those guys do some pretty fancy driving. Have you ever taken a taxi from Port of Spain to San Fernando? You know how you hear about the plane taxiing on the runway? Well, these taxis are planing on the highway. They are flying low and usually keeping up a conversation while they do it. And still, I've been in taxis on the highway and several passengers are asleep the whole way, while I am white-knuckling it and my eyes are glued to the road for the whole ride. I envy their confidence. Or is it stupidity? I guess we'll never know. One of the reasons I don't enjoy driving anymore is that I am always driving an old car and something is always not working. I have had cars that shut down in the most inconvenient of places. Nothing is worse than having to open your bonnet and come out of your car when there's a line of cars behind you on a main road or at a traffic light. And of course, because I'm female, some smart-ass man is going to pull up alongside and ask, "You sure you have gas?" You know, he'd never ask another man that. And woe be unto you if you know how to fix whatever the problem is without the help of said man. He gets quite offended. What do you mean you don't need my help? How dare you not be a damsel in distress? Don't you see my white horse parked over there? Speaking of parking and walking to wherever I'm going is another very un-Trini thing I like to do. Trinis want to park right in front of where they're going. And they will go to great lengths not to have to walk a few extra feet. It's a no parking zone, a fire hydrant, handicap parking, somebody's driveway. What does any of that have to do with them? I remember one of my friends insisting that I park right in front of the office we were going to, although I kept telling her I didn't think it was allowed. When we came out, the wrecker had already hooked up the car. I told her I didn't care what she had to promise that policeman, but she was getting them to leave that car behind. And she did it too, though it took some begging. People, if it looks like a prime spot and there are cars all around, but that spot is vacant, chances are you shouldn't park there. Because my car is usually old and small, I don't have truck and SUV money, I think there are some drivers who take it as a personal affront that my car is ahead of theirs. So they will do whatever fancy moves it takes to get ahead of it. I remember this one guy in a fancy car did some kamikaze moves between lanes just to pass me before shooting off like a rocket. A couple of minutes later, when I got to the light, there he was, waiting for it to change, just like me. I pulled up alongside, put my window down and said, "Wait, you ain't reached where you're going yet?" before driving off as the light changed. I wouldn't recommend that now, since COVID, people blood near their skin. Yes, between the potholes, traffic, and drivers who think they're alone on the road so they can do a U-turn in front of QRC because they really wanted to go down Maraval Road, true story, by the way, driving in this country can be like being in a very bad video game. But public transport isn't where it should be. That is a whole other episode. And some things just aren't in walking distance. So until things improve, strap in, because chances are it's going to be a wild ride. Did you make it to the end? Good for you. Perseverance is a good quality to have. Share it with your friends and see how far they get. Stay safe, and until next time, I'm just saying.